Welcome back, everybody. And today we're going to talk about Pluto retrograde. When we talk about retrograde planets, so to start off is like planets don't actually move backwards. Some of them do have an orbit that moves in a different direction, but in true reality, the planets are not actually moving backwards, but from our vantage point, they do move backwards at certain times. And so we call those retrogrades, right? And it's an interesting concept because, again, I think astrology, and this is why we talk about the archetypes and the myths and the lores of certain astrology placements and the planets and the signs, because it has a lot to do with psychology. Like astrology and psychology to me go hand in hand. The way we interpret certain planetary influences, the way that we experience them in many ways are psychological, right? And retrogrades is one of those examples. It is a psychological thing. From our vantage point, we see a planet moving backwards, even though it's not technically moving backwards. And so we experience a retrograde energy, right? And so I think when we talk about retrogrades in general, and this is why I love archetypal astrology and what I call ascension astrology, which is kind of evolutionary astrology. We have to also realize that planetary transits, planetary placements, all evolve over time, right? They're not going to have the same effects as they did 1,000 years ago, meaning we like to look at patterns in astrology. So for instance, Pluto in Aquarius, we can look back at the last times that Pluto was in Aquarius, which was during the American Revolution, the French Revolution, etc. So you can see some patterns and themes emerge, right? However, we've evolved as well. We're in a completely different energetic space than we were in 1776, right? So we have to understand that we can look at patterns, but these influences, these planetary influences also evolve as we evolve. There's also the conversation of the fact that Pluto wasn't actually discovered then. Okay, Pluto wasn't discovered till 1930. And it was named a planet and it was given the name Pluto, Hades, Lord of the Underworld, right? That's going to have a much different psychological effect than when you're unaware of a planetary transit, right? In the 1700s and 1800s, they weren't aware of Pluto. So they weren't aware of its influence. That does change things, okay? Awareness transforms into consciousness. So we have to look at these in different ways. And I do think with retrogrades, I've definitely evolved my perspective over time in terms of what do retrogrades actually mean? What do they do? What is the purpose of them? How can we utilize retrogrades, right? Now, I think it is really easy to see certain patterns. For instance, when the inner planets go retrograde, right? Now, first of all, the sun and the moon never retrograde. So the luminaries don't go retrograde, which is another interesting point, right? I talked about this with my rising sign series. The luminaries don't go retrograde. That's an interesting factor, right? They're always forward moving. The nodes of the moon are always in retrograde, almost always in retrograde. So it's a different type of interpretation. Now, when the inner planets such as Mercury, right? Mercury retrogrades are notorious. We do see patterns, though. We do see that we have technological issues, we have mishaps, we have miscommunications. Sometimes things fall through during a Mercury retrograde, right? So we see those patterns and we have to know, okay, it obviously does have this type of influence, right? But at the same time, it is psychological, right? So Mercury retrograde, Venus retrogrades, especially Mars retrogrades, can be exceptionally challenging, right? But when we get to the outer planets, right? Now, Jupiter and Saturn are kind of in between. They go through retrograde cycles as well, of course. But when we talk about the outer planets like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, these planets have very long retrograde cycles. For instance, Pluto's retrograde for like 5.5 months out of the year. So it's very normal for these outer planets to have long retrograde cycles. So we need to look at these differently, and I think understand them differently, and really get to know these rhythms and cycles, right? So for instance, we had a good 6-week period between the end of March and now where there were no retrogrades, okay? So if you think back a little bit to the last 6 weeks-ish, there was a ton of forward movement. So much was happening all at once. All the planets were direct, right? So this gives us somewhat of an understanding that when the planets are direct, there seems to be a lot of outer happenings, right? A lot of external things are moving, a lot of external events are happening. And so when planets go retrograde, especially the outer planets, right, which I'm going to talk about Pluto today, it doesn't mean that external motion doesn't occur, right? It can't, because there are times when we have 6 or 7, planets retrograde. And so it doesn't mean all of a sudden everything stops and nothing is happening. But we have to ask ourselves, okay, well, what do these retrogrades mean? And again, when we're talking about outer planets versus inner planets, that's a very different experience, right? So let's talk about Pluto. So Pluto went retrograde yesterday, stationed retrograde at around 5 degrees and 30-ish seconds, right? Now, Pluto is going to be retrograde till the middle of October. So what does it mean? There's going to be, of course, every astrologer is going to see something different, is going to have a different perspective, which I love. But for me, I'm really feeling like Pluto, and Pluto's archetype, being this excavator, this activator, Pluto is a very powerful planet, a very kind of, we have to take the mythology, right, of Pluto, also known as Hades, right, is the lord of the underworld. And so what is the underworld? The underworld to me is things that cannot be seen with the naked eye. Energy, right? Things that are happening. This could be events that are happening. This could be conversations that are happening. This could be energy. This could be emotions underneath the surface. But it is things that we don't see with the naked eye. We can sense them because Pluto has very powerful senses, right? This is why I think Pluto, being the co-ruler of Scorpio, makes a lot of sense, because Scorpios do have that kind of ability. It's a kind of sixth sense, right? They can sense when things aren't right. They can sense when something's going on and they can't quite put their finger on it, but they feel it. That is kind of how Pluto is, right? So when Pluto is forward moving, it feels to me like the power, the transformation, the excavation of what has gone unnoticed, what has gone unseen is very much in the external world, right? We have big events. We have, big conflicts, or we have almost, I would say, very obvious transformations going on in the external world, right? And when Pluto goes retrograde, right? There's a sense of that being pulled internally, but again, this doesn't stop external events. I think what this does is Pluto reverses the energy, right? So that we can finally see what we've been sensing, okay? And I think that this can go one of two ways, or both ways. We can finally see things that we've been sensing that just didn't feel quite right. So it gets revealed, right? It comes to the surface. We finally see it. We face it. We deal with it, right? On the other hand, it can also reveal things that we've been sensing, anticipating. Our spidey senses have been picking up on it, but we haven't quite seen it. So suddenly things start to manifest in a good way. Things we felt were coming. We felt like something was bubbling beneath the surface, but it wasn't quite there yet. So it has that effect, and that can be very, very positive. I don't like to use positive and negative because it is duality, but we understand it like that. things can manifest very positively that we felt were coming. We had this, this sixth sense about. And then we can also find that other things manifest as well. Things we knew were happening. We could feel things going on in the background, and then they come to the surface and we're like, oh shit, we have to deal with this now, right? And interestingly, in Hellenistic astrology, which is basically the ancient practices of astrology, Hades actually ruled the second house in Hellenistic astrology. The second house was actually known as the gates of Hades. And for those of you familiar with modern astrology, the second house we now associate with Taurus, and we associate it with things like resources, abundance, prosperity, our time, right? Our efforts, our labor, and how that manifests prosperity to us in the world. So interestingly, in ancient astrology, the second house being called the gates of Hades tells us a little something, right? And again, in modern astrology, it's ruled by the sign of Taurus, which is actually the sister sign of Scorpio. So to me, that kind of tells us that Hades, right? Pluto, the underworld, in many ways, if the second house was the gate of Hades, then it tells us a little something, right? That in order to really gain power, prosperity, abundance, to truly unlock the codes of manifestation, if you will, we have to go under. We have to go through the esoteric. We have to go into the metaphysical. We have to go into the energy underlying the physical manifestations in order to unlock the gates, right? And this is why Pluto can also bring mass amounts of wealth, right? And so Pluto's in Aquarius. Now, this is doing a lot of things. So for one, it's bringing the power back to the people, to the collectives, right? Now, Aquarius doesn't mean the whole world, right? When we say Aquarius rules humanity, it rules, I think, the essence of humanity, right? The idea that we are all kind of a collective species. But remember that Aquarius in modern astrology is ruled by Uranus. And Uranus is about the outlier. Uranus is not the mainstream. Uranus is the outlier, the niche, the black sheep. And so when we understand that, so Pluto and Aquarius, I think, is actually not just bringing power to the people as like, I think humanity is becoming empowered, right? We are, and this has a lot to do with Saturn and Neptune and Aries as well. There's a power to the people moment happening where we are taking our power back from these systems and structures of control. We are taking our power back from feeling like we are helpless and victimized and that we have no say, that we hold no power. We are just at the whim of the elites and the governments and all these things. So there is a power to the people moment. But Pluto is also giving power to very specific groups of people, right? And to me, Aquarius is a lot about frequency. So the power is going to go to those niche groups within the collective that are holding a very high frequency, right? I also think it's giving power to communities, small communities or groups of people that are working together for the greater good, who have a vision, who have an innovative idea. That's where the power is going to lie, in these niche groups. There's also power going to the outliers, right? The ones who have been called crazy, the ones who have been ostracized from the mainstream, the ones who lie on kind of the fringes of society, the crazy ones, the weird ones, right? The power is also going to them because we had a vision. We, in many ways, were sensing what was coming, aka the ascension. And so Aquarius is often ahead of its time. A lot of people were ahead of their time, and we felt very disempowered because the masses or the mainstream or the hive mind of the collective couldn't see what we saw, right? Weren't on the same frequency, the same wavelength, right? And so now I think there's a lot of power in those who have been living differently, who are the outliers, who are the black sheep, who were ahead of their time, who are the visionaries, right? So that's a big moment. Now, I also think Pluto being gates of Hades, ruling the second house, I do think that this has a lot to do with the redistribution of wealth, right? Aquarius does care about equality. And so the redistribution of wealth being given to certain groups, maybe, based on, it could be based on frequency, it could be based on who is really serving the highest good, right? This goes into us talking about the new financial system and the quantum financial system and how that's going to work. But overall, I think Pluto's going to level the playing field in terms of wealth across the board for the collective, right? And so these are all the themes that we're seeing. Now, again, Pluto is also the excavator, right? Bringing things from underneath to the surface. Aquarius also rules what is out of bounds. Again, it's outliers, it's the niche, it's the people who are outside of the mainstream, outside of what is normal. Pluto is also, right, excavating things that have been long buried, long forgotten, and bringing them back to the forefront. So this is where we're getting all the conversations about, technology. What technology has been hidden from us? What technology actually exists? We're talking about quantum physics and timelines and UFOs and UAPs and galactics and dimensions, right? Pluto is also excavating all of that. He's bringing all that back to the surface, right? So that we can actually understand who we are, what we're doing here, how the cosmos work. Like, this is going to be a lot of Pluto and Aquarius. Now, Pluto's retrograde, right, from 5 degrees, and he will go back to about 3 degrees, and this will go until the middle of October. Now, don't forget that at the end of June, Jupiter's going to move into Leo, and immediately is going to come up into an opposition with Pluto and Aquarius. Okay. Now, also, as Pluto goes retrograde and moves backwards, it will end up trining Uranus and Gemini, I think in July, in an exact trine. That's a very when the outer planets have harmonious interactions, it's really good. That's going to be a huge thing. Think disclosure, think information, think advanced communicative technology, think, information coming from the future, information coming from what is out of bounds, right? And then we're going to have the North Node enter Aquarius at the end of July. Now, the nodes do move backwards, so we won't have a Pluto North Node conjunction until 2027. But nonetheless, this is where things get really interesting. So with this Pluto retrograde, what I want to say is, first of all, I'm going to talk about the degree that Pluto's going retrograde at. I think that's very indicative of looking at what this retrograde is going to be telling us. What is the message here, right? And so I like to look at the degree that the planet goes retrograde at, because that's where it's spinning the story. That's the pivot moment. That's where the message is coming through, right? And so this retrograde, I think, is a realignment. I think all the directions, actions, decisions that we've made since the big event in February, right? It has set up so many different timelines. Like, to me, Aquarius is just, it's timelines, it's frequency, that's the best way that I can describe Aquarius. So we've taken a lot of action. We've begun a lot of new things, right? We've aligned ourselves based on our decisions, right? And the paths we've chosen. We have set up a lot of various timeline options, right? Individually and collectively. So now that Pluto's retrograde, what I think is going to happen is that energy is getting pulled inward a little bit. So Pluto's now working on our internal structure, right? Our internal DNA and geometries, etc., to make sure that all the pieces come into play, right? That all the missing pieces get dropped in and we get realigned internally to fit these timelines that we have chosen and that we have begun. So it's a natural process, right? There's nothing necessarily we have to do, but I do think things will be revealed, right? Pieces of the puzzle will come into place. people, places, and things that are aligned for those timelines will suddenly be brought into us, right? Like Pluto has a very strong magnetic force. So we're going to be bringing in all the people, places, and things, all the missing puzzle pieces aligning to us for these timelines. Now, I also think on a collective level, this is going to pull back the veil on a lot of these Aquarius themes. So interestingly, like I said, it doesn't mean external things aren't going to be happening, right? It just means, I think, more information will come in, more will be revealed, more will be excavated and brought to the surface. So we get to finally see with clarity what's going on. So we can expect that a lot of these themes and a lot of these topics are going to now be coming into the forefront and into focus. So Pluto went retrograde at 5 degrees, right? And normally this is my favorite book. You guys know it. If you don't know it, I highly recommend this book, 360 Degrees of Your Star Destiny. This is by Elias Lonsdale. And this is a little bit different from the Sabian symbols, but basically this is a channeling of every degree in the zodiac. And so typically what we do when we're reading degrees is we round up to the next degree. So typically if I was reading a degree for Pluto at 5 degrees Aquarius, I would round up to the 6th degree. However, during a retrograde, it's pulling back. So I actually round down. And so I'm going to read the 5th degree of Aquarius. And it says, she is in the earth. She is of the earth. She is what could only be formed from within this earth in her feminine soul. And she shows us what it's about. Earth, which we always miss and pass right over. If we attune to her, she shall correct that flaw and let us in on the fertile tract of truth, the ones our mind could never grasp. And again, this already starts out super interesting because I've been telling everyone, especially those of you who are doing transit readings with me, that with all the fire and air energy this year, it seems dire in a way and very important that we ground everything down into the body. Right? We've done a ton of the etheric spiritual work, especially with Neptune and Saturn in Pisces, right? Which was a whole era. So we've done a lot of the kind of etheric upper dimensional level work. And now we're here to bring it down into physicality. We're here to ground it into our bodies, embody it, anchor it, right? We're also bringing in the future. Right? I've been talking about this a lot. The cosmic human is not necessarily a merge this way. It's a merge this way. Bringing the future timeline into the present moment of now. So the higher self that we've all been working with, right? Our higher self, our soul, is actually our future self. And so us and our future selves are merging. This is very Pluto and Aquarius. But the irony here is that in order to merge with the higher self, the future self, in order to merge with the future timeline, in order to merge with the higher dimensions, we have to focus on the body. We have to focus on bringing it into physicality. And that's the irony here, is it's going to feel a little bit like a paradox. But again, I talked about this with Uranus moving out of Taurus, right? The conversation around Taurus is nowhere near done. We have Chiron entering Taurus in June. We have Saturn entering Taurus in 2028. And Taurus is the earth. Taurus is the body. Taurus is the physical grounded reality, right? So right out the gate, this degree is talking about the earth, that we just pass right over her. We don't even include Mother Earth as a sentient being in the conversation about ascension, about the timelines, about our own personal development. We're kind of just glossing over the fact that Mother Earth is the main player in this game. she is the main character here. And so it's telling us here, and very interesting, right? As I said, Pluto retrograde in Aquarius at this degree, this is the point of this retrograde. This is the message. And so it goes on to say, her force of example is really tremendous. She carries this mana, life force energy, that pulls us right out of our heads and into the womb wisdom that bears new worlds intact. What is it saying? Get out of the mind and into the heart. And especially, obviously, this particular retrograde is highlighting the feminine here, pulling down into the womb wisdom, the innate natural wisdom that the feminine carry about birthing this new world. We don't need to be taught how to do this. We know how to do this. Mother Earth knows how to do this, right? It says, just to be with her is to get down under and hearken to mysteries that turn us inside out and upside down and never stop correcting for what is missing in this masculine, dominant, modern consciousness. Very interesting. Aquarius is not a feminine sign, by the way. Aquarius technically is a yang sign. However, Aquarius is known as the water bearer and is often depicted as a woman pouring water jugs out down into the earth. She is pouring wisdom. Okay, so this retrograde again is highlighting the feminine wisdom that will correct what is missing in this masculine, dominant, modern consciousness. And I think it's going to do this by a few ways. One is we got to come into the body. We've got to remember that the body is the most divine intelligence. This meat suit is the most advanced technology, period. Mother Earth, most intelligent technology, right? And the masculine dominated world has forgotten that. And this will be corrected. I think also when it says mysteries that turn us inside out and upside down, right? Again, Pluto retrograde, revealing, excavating. It is going to bring in the mysteries of the universe that completely turn everything on its head of what we know to be true because we were told by science or we were told by, physicists, people that thought they had it all figured out. It's going to completely defy that, right? Goes on to say, in one sense, all we can do with her is look back to that ancient, timeless place and touch in there and never lose that substantive feeling for life. In another sense, we are meant to take it further if we're ready. This deep, feminine, earthly force also comes to meet us from worlds yet unborn. Okay? The new paradigm, the new earth, what has not been completely birthed yet into physicality. There, she metamorphoses into myriad forms and guises. All of these say the core nature remains to be tapped. It has never been lived in a true sense. And so again, we're talking about technology and we're talking about our future selves. I think this Pluto retrograde is pulling the energy into us individually, but also into the core of Mother Earth, right? The true nature remains to be tapped. It has never been lived in a true sense. We have never lived fully, right? Maybe in some other, timelines we can discuss that, but we're talking about recent, right? This 26,000 year cycle. The core nature of who we are, the God selves in a human body. That is what's going to be tapped. This is like DNA activations. This is gifts coming online. This is the God selves becoming embodied into form. This is Mother Earth's core returning to its natural state. And it says, for she guards the mysteries. For the guards the mysteries of she, of Earth, the awakening one in our midst. She is more relevant than ever. Only as we get full and rounded and whole in our deep-rooted earthiness can we provide a sufficiently hardy vessel for this wild future we face to stream through us and become that fruition we have always looked towards. Again, this is confirming everything I've felt. which was especially the line here, our deep-rooted earthiness. We have to regain the core of who we are, which is human, that we are one with the earth, that we are aligned with this planet, that we come from the same material, right? But also it's going on to say we need to provide a sufficiently hardy vessel for this wild future to stream through us. So this, I don't know, this just gives me the vibe that it's all about the body. It's all about the rootedness, the groundedness. And when it says hardy vessel, I think that could mean a few things. For one, with Saturn and Neptune and Aries, right? There is this need for more movement. We're going to have to move our bodies more. We're going to have to get that prana, that life force, that source energy flowing through the body. And that comes from movement. We also have to completely get out of the mind, the ego programming, which is a very limited synthetic operating system that keeps the body sick, weak, and conditioned. That's the other main thing, right? We have to get out of that. We have to go. I really think I've said this summer, first contact summer. Again, that's my feeling. I think it's going to be a first contact summer. And I also think that it's going to be one of the other rising themes is getting back in tune with our natural holistic way of living. This is going to bring up so many things about the way we work, right? If we are destroying our bodies through work, then that is slavery. Okay. Our bodies should feel alive. They should feel good. They should feel self-sufficient, self-healing, strong, full of vitality, so that when we do our work, our service, we are revitalized through it, not drained, right? So there's going to be a lot of conversations about that. Again, I also predicted that there's going to be a huge rise in the return to holistic living. Feng Shui is going to be a huge one, that we've been basically living in these very synthetic homes, living styles that are against nature. We are going to start having a lot of conversations again about what's in our food. What are we putting into our bodies? I think there's going to be a huge revolt against anything synthetic going into the body. So there might be people that go down that timeline. You want to put you want to put a chip in your brain? You want to put a chip in your arm? You do that. But I think the majority is going to revolt against that. Holistic healing, right? The witches, they burned. They had the wisdom of natural healing. They understood herbs. They understood things like the sun and the moon and the healing it provides, right? Again, synthetic medicines and things. I think there's going to be a reversal of that. Fabrics. The frequency of fabrics, what we're putting on our body. These are going to be huge conversations, because this is about us getting back to that rootedness. And this is about us having that hardy vessel, right? That allows this very high frequency, very potent energy that is streaming in, especially with Uranus and Gemini. The body needs to be able to not only translate these frequencies, right? But to anchor them, to process them, to integrate them. This is the new operating system. And so it's two worlds in one. I talked about that in my May update. It's two worlds colliding. It's a hyper advanced futuristic technology timeline, and it's a very organic, rooted, human, holistic timeline. And somehow those two are going to intertwine. And finally, it ends with, in the now, she comes in any and all forms, and she promises a way of being that will bring us to our senses in a very profound union. I hadn't even read this yet. This is crazy. A very profound union between the cosmic core and earthly substance. That synthesis commands our best to conceive of what can be as the new earth body. So this is why I love when everything confirms. This is why I've been harping on the cosmic human. and my seminars have now changed to the Cosmic Human Seminars because I felt it so deeply. I hadn't even read this degree, so I love the confirm. It is the blending of the past and future, right? We can say that the past, the original human, right, was the original kind of human vessel, and the future self, which has a light body feel to it, right? We don't exactly know what it is, but they are merging. The future and the past and the present are coming into one. The cosmic and the human are coming into one, right? The etheric and the earth are coming into one. And this retrograde is going to bring that in. It's going to be a very unique time. And so just to give a little bit more context as well about this retrograde is Pluto, obviously, and this is from Richard Rudd's The Gene Key book, also a book that I highly, highly recommend. Pluto, because he moves so slowly, he doesn't change gene keys very often, okay? So he just entered gene key 41. I think it was end of last year, somewhere like very end of last year when Pluto hit 2 degrees of Aquarius. He moved into gene key 41. He had spent years in gene key 60, which was the shadow of limitation and the Siddhi of justice. Okay, now he's in 41. I want to tell you why 41 is so interesting. If you have 41 as one of your main keys in your gene key chart, I do. This happens to be my North Node. So I'm very familiar with it. And first of all, the reason that this gene key is so special is because, and again, we're doing this in the Cosmic Human Seminars for those of you that are interested in kind of joining this work. But in the gene keys, there are 64 gene keys, and Richard Rudd has grouped them into what he calls codon rings. Okay, his channelings, his body of work that he's produced here basically says that the gene keys are in our DNA, that we all hold these sequences basically in our DNA, but some of us have more pronounced sequences, right? Like the main gene keys you have, those are going to be more pronounced in your DNA. And the more we unlock these, the more it unlocks it in the DNA of all of humanity. Now, each gene key is grouped into what he calls a codon ring. Okay, it's a ring of specific gene keys that all share in, a similar archetype. Okay, the sequence of those gene keys is relevant to a particular organization in the DNA. It's particular to certain activations, right? And so they all have different names, like the ring of divinity or the ring of seeking, the ring of Gaia, the ring of fire, the ring of water. Okay, they all share in kind of a similar blueprint. This is the only gene key that has its own ring. So there are no other gene keys that share in this ring, and this is called the ring of origin. And so this tells us a lot too, right? The ring of origin, it is the origin of where we come from, the source. And he describes this gene key, and basically says that, just as some excerpts, examples from his book, he says that the genetic code of our DNA, right, is made up of a combination of 4 letters, A, T, C, and G, okay? And he said these letters are called bases, and they represent the basic building blocks of the entire code of DNA. Hidden within these billions of letters are specific instructions for the body to follow. Okay, he says, in deciphering the code of life, scientists discovered that there were places within these sequences where the body always seemed to know to begin building. Okay, so there was certain sequences where they noticed that the body was just very kind of intelligently knowing they had to build something, whether that was proteins or, bones or whatever. They just kind of, the body has this innate intelligence. And he says, they found that wherever the body sees the letters A, T, G in a sequence, it acts on the instructions that follow. So basically, I think what we're talking about is that, why is this one hair just not want to cooperate with me? That ATG seems to be this start instruction that the DNA can read. And he says this is called the start codon because it operates like a front door key into the code itself. So 41, the ring of origin, is the start codon. So the fact that Pluto is in this gene key and will be in this gene key for probably like 2 more years, again, due to retrogrades back and forth, we are starting something. The DNA of our body is getting activated, whether that is starting to build the light body, starting to build the new earth, starting to build the new timelines, whatever that means. The start codon has been activated, has been triggered. Now, Pluto's retrograde, he's going to stay in this gene key, but it's going to take us back, retrograding through the earlier degrees of this gene key and then move forward again. So again, like I said, I feel like as Pluto's been direct in this gene key, we have been starting to build, starting to activate the new earth, the new paradigm, the new timelines externally. Now that Pluto's going retrograde, he's going to be activating it internally. Again, the internal hardware and software has to match the external creations, the timelines that we're building, right? So he basically, sums up this shadow as fantasy. And the shadow is basically where you have all these ideas, you have these dreams of like what you could build and what the new earth will look like and what, these goals that we have, but we never seem to actually accomplish anything, that it's like a pipe dream, and it stays a pipe dream because we just fantasize about it, but we don't actually start, right? And so he gives, with every shadow here, he'll give 2 examples of the way that this shadow plays out in human consciousness. So one way it can play out is called being dreamy, where he says this shadow is about escaping life through dreaming and fantasizing. These people have an agenda dictated by fantasy. They really do not live in the real world. Whatever you say to such people, they will interpret it through their dream. Such people do not actually want to fulfill their dream, but are addicted to the inner fantasy in their mind. They are governed by a deep-seated fear that doesn't allow them to have proper human relationships. This dreaminess often presents as a kind of lethargy that gives rise to the gradual breakdown of the energetic systems in the body, in particular, the vascular and digestive systems. The only way for these people to break out of their mental cycle is to begin manifesting their dreams on the material plane. So again, this is kind of like where people can get stuck, where they're not living in reality, right? They have a dream, they have a vision, but they're not able to action it in real life. And he says these people usually have issues with human relationships, right? So this could be people that are very isolated, right? They might have a lot of great ideas and they're always visualizing and fantasizing, but they're never actually building anything. They're never actually doing it. This could also be people that have these dreams and have these visions, and it feels like they're trying to make it happen, but they're unable to because they're missing the human component, which you have to have good relationships. You have to collaborate with others. You have to work with others, right? You have to actually take the steps to make this dream a reality. Now, the other way that this shadow can present is called hyperactive, where he says, this is a bundle of nervous energy. These people are always ahead of themselves, being absolutely carried away by their dreams. This kind of nature inevitably leads to burnout, as the power of the fantasy they are trying to bring into the world outstrips the limitations of the material plane. Their insatiable hunger drives them into deeper and deeper problems while placing enormous pressure on the nervous system. The inevitable breakdown of such a nature is often highly dramatic and destructive. The hope for these people pivots upon their ability to allow others into their life and relinquishing their one-pointed obsession with manifesting their dreams exactly as it appears in their minds. So again, the kind of flip side of this coin is people who are so obsessed with their dreams, obsessed with their visions becoming reality, that they're kind of just bulldozing through life trying to make it happen, but they're burning out in the process. Their nervous system is completely overwhelmed, and there might be just some attachment to wanting it to play out a certain way, wanting it to play out the exact way they're picturing it in their minds, but they're not allowing the forces of the universe basically to bring them the right alignment, the right people, the right timing, that it may manifest in a way that they weren't anticipating, right? So this brings us to the gift. And this is what I think we should really be focusing on through this retrograde. The gift is anticipation. So he says basically that, let's see, there is an interesting phenomenon that occurs as you raise your frequency. You become more sensitive to the hidden properties of the world around you. One of the things you become aware of is the presence of morphogenetic fields. Morphogenetic fields was a theory postulated by Rupert Sheldrake. If you guys haven't researched him, he has really interesting theories on morphogenetic fields. And he says, but many other cultures have spoken about these as energy fields throughout history. Essentially, a morphogenetic field is an invisible energy grid that communicates specific information across time and space. Depending on your sensitivity, you can pick up information from the past or future. So again, this is where I think this retrograde is really bringing the pieces of the puzzle into play for us. So we are able to tap into the past, right? And bring wisdom and remembrances from that. And we are also able to tap into the future of the future is not set in stone, but we get the inklings of what wants to come into the present moment. And so we're basically able to pick up information from all of these different energy fields and bring that into the now. So he says that this gift is a special gift. As higher frequencies begin to operate here, you will pick up very specific information from the morphogenetic field. Every one of the 64 gene keys operates out of a particular morphogenetic field. So he says this may explain why certain people seem to have premonitions about the future. The greatest leaders are those who build upon the past, but also anticipate what is coming. People with this gift of anticipation are natural leaders. This gift has one single genetic agenda. It is always attuned to the next evolutionary energetic grid that is wanting to descend into form. So again, this has a lot to do with us. Again, like he's saying, take wisdom from the past, take learning, information, right? But also tapping into the future. And this is going to happen directly by tapping into your future self. Don't try to tap in too much to the collective future because that is unknown. But tap into your future self. Feel as he's saying, the next evolutionary grid, the next energy grid of evolution for humanity is there. And we're each going to be picking up pieces of that in what wants to be brought into the now, what wants to be brought into fruition. And he basically says that these are the blueprints of evolution. Which blueprint it picks up depends upon the level of frequency and the person's conditioning and geography. We will pick up different blueprints in different places. As our frequency rises, the more details we will be able to see. Premonitions occur to people when their body receives a sudden surge of frequency through a shock or through being in a particular place with a very strong morphogenetic field, right? This is where we talk about grids and ley lines and vortexes. When we are called to travel to certain places, we are basically being called to that morphogenetic field to pick up a certain code, to pick up a certain energy, a certain message, a certain download that is aligned with our current blueprint, right? Now he says, when you are able to maintain a high frequency in this gift, you will be able to download all beautiful things from the morphogenetic field. Since the start codon is the only one in gene key 41, it has a remarkable place within the codon rings. The 21 codon rings are threaded together as chemical chains that relay biological information between each other. This method of information relay means that the body can essentially operate like a quantum computer. Again, as I've been saying, what do you think they've built all this technology off of? Us. It's all just a mimic and a reflection of us. The human is the most advanced biocomputer ever. It is the most advanced technology. He says we can organize multiple levels of information instantaneously, right? And he says the implications of this are astounding. Every single start codon inside every single cell of your body is electromagnetically linked to each other. This is the foundation of the holographic body, or the light body, if you will, which in turn is linked to the universe. Every impulse inside you is therefore communicated to the whole, just as every impulse within the whole is chemically mirrored in our DNA. Once you have discovered the knack of influencing your own DNA, you can literally reprogram every cell within your body. However, in order to activate the secret chemical formula inside your body that accompanies the highest state of consciousness, you must learn to overcome the inertia of humanity as a whole. So again, the inertia, which actually is gene key 9, by the way. The inertia is, and gene key 9 actually has a lot to do with gene key 41. This shadow is about having the vision, having the dream, having the download, and never being able to actually do it. Never being able to bring it into fruition. And this links to, as he's mentioning, gene key 9, inertia, and that shadow, where he basically says that we focus so much on the day-to-day, like mundane life and details, so to speak, that we focus on just so much of the inessential that we waste time, and we're never actually moving in direction of our dreams because we're so distracted by like the day-to-day bullshit stuff, basically. And that, you know, we need to embrace the power that lives within us. And I do think that's going to be another theme that probably emerges from this retrograde, is whatever feels like it's a waste of your time, whatever is not benefiting your body, right? Your groundedness, your healing, your sense of wellness, waste of time. Things that are distracting and pulling your attention away from your mission and your purpose and your dream and your vision, waste of time. People, places, and things that are distracting you from your true work, right? From the things you actually want to do, from the things that you're passionate about that light you up, waste of time. So again, this realignment that's going on with Pluto and Aquarius, it's throughout this retrograde, I think is going to be so profound to, by the time we get to the end of the year, we're going to then be in another Pluto direct phase where we've realigned, all the pieces of the puzzle are coming in, right? We're anticipating where we're going. And then we'll enter another cycle where there's another round of like decisions and new opportunities and new timeline options, etc. So happy Pluto retrograde. We won't have another, right now we just have Pluto retrograde. I have to look, I'll have to look again at the transits coming up, but I don't think we have any other major retrogrades coming till I think July, but I will double check that. But this is the first retrograde of the year. Well, we did have a Mercury one, but in terms of the outer planets, this is the first planet to go retrograde, and it's telling us a lot about what is going to be brought in the summertime. Again, summertime's going to be wild, energetically. So much is going on. This whole year's been wild, but the summer has this very high potency to it. So again, for those of you who are guided, if you have not done a 2026 transit reading, but you want to, the summer might be the best time to do that. Also, especially for those of you who have like any major Taurus placement, or you have Chiron in Taurus and you're about to enter your Chiron return, I would also recommend, let's look at your 2026 transits. That's going to be a big healing cycle for you. So love you guys. Happy Pluto retrograde, and I'll be back soon.